What is going on, YouTube? Last week, Israel killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar in a drone strike. Since the killing of Sinwar, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and to an extent Netanyahu and Donald Trump are attempting to sell us on the fact that this might be the end to the war. If we look at a statement issued by Kamala Harris, she says that Sinwar was the mastermind behind October 7th, the deadliest attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. Terrorists killed 1,200 innocent people, blah, blah, blah. Essentially equating him to Hitler, right? If he caused the second worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust, that makes him a second Hitler. Now, if you draw a parallel between October 7th and the Holocaust, it makes sense that killing the guy who planned it puts an end to this war, right? If the Israel-Hamas war is World War II 2.0 and October 7th is the second Holocaust, then killing Sinwar, the next Hitler, ends the war, right? That makes sense. Joe Biden issued a similar statement, mastermind behind the October 7th massacres. But there was something interesting about what Joe Biden said. He had said the same thing about the Holocaust, but he had also mentioned that this was similar to the killing of bin Laden, which is something that Kamala Harris couldn't make that comparison on her own, as electorally it would seem a little conceited, especially since she didn't call the strike to do that, to kill Sinwar. But Biden was part of the Obama administration that took out bin Laden. So Biden is making this comparison to play backup for Kamala Harris. But what strikes me as interesting about that comparison is that October 7th is a lot closer to 9/11 than it is to the Holocaust. Now, if you actually compare the Holocaust and October 7th objectively, the only similarity they really have is that the victims are Jewish, but they weren't targeted for being Jewish. That's what happened with the Holocaust. The Holocaust was targeting Jewish people for being Jewish. October 7th was not targeting Jewish people for being Jewish. It was targeting Israeli settlers for being settlers on occupied land. That's what Hamas is. They're resistance fighters attempting to win back the land that was stolen from them during the Nakba of 1948. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, there is really not much of a comparison between October 7th and the Holocaust. But if we look at 9/11, which is a much more appropriate comparison, not just because they're both named after dates, but because they're both imperial powers that normally do not face attacks on their homeland, but normally are involved in wars in someone else's country. Now, of course, between Israel and the United States, Israel does get attacked on their home turf way more than the United States does. It's happened to the United States like twice in recent history. Israel does get bombed a lot more than the United States. I'm not even going to try and argue that. But a significant attack like this that's killed that many people is very uncommon for both countries. They both had very aggressive responses to it. Now, if we compare October 7th to 9/11 and the consequential wars that happened after them, the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, those are more appropriate comparisons to the Israel-Hamas war than World War II. Now, the guy, because we're comparing Sinwar to Hitler here, the guy, because apparently all these wars need a guy that they have to take out. The guy from the Iraq war was Saddam Hussein. The guy from the Afghanistan war was Osama bin Laden. After Saddam Hussein was killed in 2006, the war in Iraq continued for 5 more years. After bin Laden was killed in 2011, the war in Afghanistan continued for 10 more years. So in these Middle Eastern conflicts, there's never been really a time where killing the guy results in the war ending. Now, Hitler's death brought a relatively swift end to the German portion of World War II. At the time, there wasn't this many resistance factions. There wasn't social media creating such a polarized narrative of who's on which side. This is not comparable to a decade-long tragedy where the two greatest superpowers in the world are both saying you have to put this to a halt, and the other side has essentially no sympathy from the developed world, and people realize the tide is turning and they no longer want to go down with the sinking ship that is Nazism. The Middle East is, and I hate to say this, it's a lot more complicated than maybe World War II was, although in my opinion it's not really that complicated as to who is in the wrong here. Neither side, Israel or Hamas, has gotten what they want out of this. Hamas has not eliminated the Zionist entity known as Israel. Israel hasn't freed the hostages, which is the front for what they really want to do, which is expand into Gaza, take over the West Bank, and have this grander ambition for this greater Israel project where they take as much Arab land as they possibly can. Israel would like to go to war with Iran. They haven't defeated Hezbollah, they haven't eliminated Hamas, and they haven't gotten regime change in Iran. If Israel can keep pushing this thing and they can get Hamas eliminated from Gaza, they can eliminate Hezbollah and also eliminate the Houthis, and then they can start a war between Iran and the United States and get regime change in Iran. Now all of Iran's proxies are gone, Iran is gone, and they create a maybe more sympathetic government in Iran to Israel, like under the Shah. Regime change in Iran has been a goal of Israel's for a very long time. During the Iran-Iraq war, originally they had considered Saddam Hussein the biggest threat to peace in the world. And in that war, they actually supported Iran in the hopes that they would be able to take out Saddam Hussein. Eventually, Israel got what they wanted and they got regime change in Iraq. And Iran has been a thorn in their side ever since. So there's really no reason for Israel to stop this war. They're so close to getting what they want, which is war with Iran, although Iran is very resistant to that idea. Despite everything Israel's done, Iran's only directly attacked Israel twice since this genocidal war began. But what Israel really wants is to pull the United States into a direct war with Iran so that they can eliminate that regime, which is the only way a country like Iran is going to be eliminated. With no pressure from the United States, many countries giving lip service where they're saying stop the killing, but not actually withholding arms, not actually sanctioning the country, there's no reason for Israel to stop. Really, the differences between, there aren't many similarities between Iraq in 2003 and Iran today. Iran's military force is much stronger than Saddam Hussein's was. Their support of their base is a lot stronger. Their global partnerships are a lot stronger than Saddam Hussein's were. So Israel likely wouldn't have much success taking out Iran in a head-to-head war, especially with all of Iran's proxies, even with all of the money that the United States pumps into Israel. But a direct war between the United States and Iran with Israel on their side, who knows what could happen. And that has been Israel's ambition for a long time. They want more land in the Arab world. They want to take over all of Gaza. They want all the Palestinians gone. They want all of Iran's proxies gone. They want Iran to stop being an Islamic regime. They want to go back to the days of the Shah. And they might get that someday if they keep this war going. When you attack 40,000 innocent people, when you kill political leaders on a country's soil, and the United States only criticizes the country that you attacked for attacking you back, you have no reason to stop. That brings me to the next point, which is Netanyahu's focus is on the hostages. If you've been paying attention, you know that the hostages are, Israel has used them as an excuse for their grander ambition. Hamas attacked Israel with the goal of showing the world Israel's true colors. Hamas's goal when attacking Israel was to get Israel to retaliate so that the suffering that Palestinians have been facing for over 70 years could be shown to the world full force, and more people would understand what Israel is, who they are, create negative global PR for the country. In that respect, Hamas has been successful in what their goal was with October 7th. They wanted Israel to retaliate. Israel's been using the guise of freeing hostages for their grander ambition of taking over Gaza, the West Bank, and as much Arab territory as they can in the process. That's why they were taking over parts of Syria. They want parts of Lebanon. They want to take over as much as they possibly can. So both sides have a lot to gain in this war. Nobody has met their military objectives. There's no real pressure for a ceasefire. There's lip service, which ties into the election that's coming up, but this war ending over one guy dying just doesn't make sense. We look at Kamala Harris and her chances at winning. If this war in Gaza is seen as successful, she gets to say, hey, Sinwar died. We didn't just recklessly kill 40,000 people for no reason. We got the guy. The war is going to end. It's not going to end in the next 3 weeks before election. Wars never end that quickly. Even when Hitler died, it was almost like a month after his death that the German portion of World War II ended. But we're in control. We got the guy, and now I can put pressure on a ceasefire because there's no reason to keep fighting, right? Ultimately, that dances around the reason this war began in the first place. It continues the narrative that October 7th was an isolated attack from Hamas and refuses to acknowledge that Israel is on occupied land. It's on stolen land where the people who used to occupy that land oftentimes are still around. If not them, their children are still around. Many, many generations have witnessed the land theft, the murder, the genocide with total impunity while this side gets to play the victim. And until that can be addressed, this war will never truly end. It will just go on a pause. But that's not the way that Kamala, the Democrats want to look at this. They want October 7th to be a terrorist attack from a scary group called Hamas, who are not resistance fighters. They're just evil, who hate Jews, and they're Islamic Nazis. And that's it. Don't look any further into it. And once this isolated incident's wrapped up, there's no reason not to vote for the Democrat, right? So Kamala's trying to pull this as a proxy for a ceasefire, which I don't think is likely, despite all of the people saying it is, and saying, hey, I did a good job, vote for me. Trump, on the other hand, is having a difficult time spinning this in a negative light. If we take a look here, Trump is accusing Biden of trying to hold back Benjamin Netanyahu with these calls for a ceasefire. So Trump, he can't go all out and say, this guy dying is the end of this, because this war continuing, Israel looking weak to diehard Israel supporters, is what Trump needs. He needs the narrative to be Israel is weak because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were forcing them to hold back. Under my regime, under my administration, or we call it in the United States, Israel will get to kill as much as they want. Kamala Harris, now in reality, is a total supporter of Israel, but she's at least on the podium somewhat like 1% sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. Trump is 0%. He doesn't even pretend to care about them. So as far as the Israelis go, they would actually prefer Trump. And Trump loves the idea of going to war with Iran. He's been dreaming about that since he came into office. The very unfavorable, in my view, Iran nuclear deal, Trump was very against that. He killed Qasem Soleimani. He's sanctioned Iran very aggressively, and he designated their military as a terrorist organization. Trump would love to go to war with Iran, and so would Israel. Israel, unlikely to try and turn this into a ceasefire. They don't gain much from it. If Trump wins, that's even worse for the prospects of a ceasefire deal. And Kamala does not have the pull with her milquetoast, 1 foot in, 1 foot out agenda to say, I don't want to alienate my progressive voters, but I can't say no to that AIPAC money. So she's likely not going to actually push for a ceasefire. If Trump wins, he's not going to do it. Netanyahu is already talking about the hostages still, which it's been stated Israeli hostages are more afraid of being killed as collateral damage from an Israeli airstrike than they are of being killed by Hamas. So it's clear Israel doesn't care about hostages. They've been using them as a political prop this entire time. So with all the major players, and from Hamas, they have no reason to stop attacking Israel. Hezbollah, the war in Lebanon, it hasn't stopped expanding into Lebanon. Iran has still yet to retaliate. The Houthis are still around. All parties involved militarily and all politicians involved with their agendas don't actually want a ceasefire. They just want to say that there's the idea of a ceasefire so that people get off their back about this genocide, and they say, hey, that was over. They got what they wanted. You got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, and let's just move on from this. And then hopefully the media stops paying attention and people stop being loud. The Democrat gets in office again, and so on and so forth. So really, there's no reason that this would result in a ceasefire. It might, the 4-day ceasefire that happened last year, maybe something insignificant like that would happen, but for a total end of this war, while none of the parties involved achieve their military objectives, A lot of people are angry. I just don't see that, especially with Netanyahu involved with his right-wing grand ambitions for a giant state of Israel. I would love for there to be a ceasefire. I would love for the fighting to end. Too many innocent lives have been lost, but I don't see it happening just off of this one guy dying. Now, everyone has been saying it's not the end of the war, but it can lead to it. But I don't think it can lead to it. I think a lot more has to happen for this war to actually end. But just one guy dying after all this carnage, after all this media, PR damage done, one guy. I don't think one guy. All of this for one guy. I don't think it's going to happen. Well, that's all. That concludes my little rant. That concludes my analysis of the situation. Please rate, comment, subscribe for more political analysis and commentary. Let me know in the comments what you guys think is going to happen, and I will catch you in the next video.